The cowboy's horse disappeared for 3 days. When it returned, it wasn't alone. The morning started like any other on Jake's ranch. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the wide-open fields in shades of gold and orange. The air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of hay and earth, and the distant mountains stood tall and silent, watching over the land. Jake, a seasoned cowboy with weathered hands and a calm demeanor, stepped outside his small wooden cabin, stretching his back as he took in the beauty of the morning. His faithful horse, Dusty, was usually waiting for him in the corral, eager for the day ahead. But this morning was different. Jake's eyes immediately scanned the corral. His heart skipped a beat. Dusty wasn't there. Not a single hoofprint marked the soft dirt, and the gate was latched just as Jake had left it the night before. He felt a tight knot form in his stomach. Dusty had never wandered off like this. Not in all the years they had worked together. The bond between a cowboy and his horse was something special, built on trust, respect, and countless shared adventures. Jake knew Dusty better than anyone else, and now, without warning, Dusty was gone. Jake rushed to the fence, calling Dusty's name in a voice both anxious and hopeful. "Dusty! Here, boy! Dusty!" The echo of his voice bounced back from the distant hills, but there was no familiar whinny in reply. Panic and worry gnawed at him. He felt as if something precious had been torn away. Dusty wasn't just a horse. He was a companion, a partner in every ride, every long day in the fields, and even in the lonely nights when the wind howled through the ranch. He grabbed his hat and saddle, his mind racing with possibilities. Perhaps Dusty had been spooked by a coyote or a sudden noise during the night. Maybe he had wandered farther than usual and gotten lost. Or worse, perhaps someone had taken him. The thought of Dusty being in danger sent a shiver down Jake's spine. He mounted his own horse and rode through the fields, scanning every corner of the ranch, calling out for Dusty at the top of his lungs. Hours passed and Jake found nothing. He checked the nearby river where Dusty liked to drink, the barns, and even the forest edge where the grass grew tall. Nothing. His throat was dry from shouting, his legs ached from riding, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. But there was no sign of Dusty. Jake's mind kept replaying the mornings they had spent together, the way Dusty would nuzzle his shoulder when he came out to the corral, the way he responded to the gentlest voice, the times they had raced across the open fields, the wind in their faces, hearts beating in unison. Those memories were now tinged with fear and uncertainty. By evening, Jake had returned to the cabin, exhausted but unwilling to give up. He left food and water in the corral, hoping that if Dusty returned on his own, he would find it. That night, Jake barely slept. He sat by the fire thinking of Dusty and all the adventures they had shared. He remembered the first time he had brought Dusty home, a small, spirited horse that refused to be tamed. Over time, they had learned to understand each other. Dusty had a mind of his own, but he was loyal and brave. That loyalty was now what Jake clung to in his heart. The next morning, Jake saddled his horse again and began another day-long search. He rode further than before, checking neighboring ranches, empty fields, and wooded areas. He asked neighbors if they had seen a horse roaming alone, but no one had. Each passing hour deepened the worry gnawing at him. He thought about all the things that could go wrong. A fall, an injury, a predator, but he refused to let his mind dwell only on fear. Dusty was clever. Dusty had survived harsh winters and blazing summers. Dusty was strong. As the day wore on, Jake grew tired, both physically and mentally, but he refused to stop. He remembered the advice his father had given him long ago. A cowboy never gives up on what he cares about. That thought kept him going. He rode past hills and streams, calling Dusty's name until his voice was hoarse. Every sound, whether it was a bird, a distant wind, or even a snapping branch, made him tense, hoping it was a sign that Dusty was near. But still, nothing. On the third day, Jake's hope was starting to waver. He felt the weight of loneliness and worry pressing down on him. The ranch felt emptier without Dusty by his side. Every corner he looked, every shadow he saw, made him think of his companion. But Jake was stubborn and determined. He refused to accept that Dusty was gone. He kept riding day after day, determined to find him no matter what it took. That third day, just as the first light of dawn began to spread across the horizon, something caught Jake's eye. From a distant ridge he saw movement, hoofbeats approaching, growing louder with each second. His heart leapt. Could it really be Dusty? His pulse raced as he rode toward the sound, calling Dusty's name with everything he had left in him. And then he saw him. Dusty appeared on the ridge, mane flowing, eyes bright and alert. Relief and joy flooded Jake all at once. He spurred his horse forward, almost unable to contain his happiness. Dusty whinnied, a sound Jake had been longing to hear for 3 long days. Dusty had returned. But as he rode closer, Jake noticed something strange. Dusty wasn't alone. Behind him, following carefully, was a smaller horse, timid and unsure, yet clearly safe because Dusty was there. Jake slowed down, cautiously approaching the 2 horses. Dusty nickered softly, as if introducing the newcomer. The smaller horse, with wide, fearful eyes, didn't run away. It stayed close to Dusty, trusting him enough to follow. Jake couldn't believe what he was seeing. Dusty had not only found his way home, but had also found another horse in need of help and brought it back with him. Tears welled up in Jake's eyes. He dismounted slowly, speaking softly to both horses. "Easy, Dusty, easy there, boy. Who's this little one?" Dusty nuzzled Jake's shoulder as if to say, "He needs us, just like I always did." The smaller horse shuffled nervously but stayed close to Dusty, sensing the calm and trust that radiated from him. Jake spent the morning calming the newcomer, offering water and gentle words. He could see that the horse was scared and confused, probably lost for days. But Dusty's presence seemed to give it hope and courage. Jake felt a profound sense of pride and awe. He had always known Dusty was smart and loyal, but this was something else entirely. Dusty had shown compassion, courage, and a sense of responsibility that went beyond anything Jake had imagined. By midday, Jake had led both horses back to the corral. Dusty pranced around, happy to be home, while the smaller horse cautiously explored its new surroundings, still keeping close to Dusty. Jake watched them, feeling a mix of relief, admiration, and wonder. Dusty had returned safely, yes, but he had also brought home a companion who clearly needed protection. Jake realized that sometimes even in loss, life could surprise you in the most beautiful ways. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Jake sat on the porch of his cabin, watching Dusty and the newcomer graze in the golden light. He felt a deep sense of connection to his animals and to the land he called home. He didn't know what the future held for this new horse or what challenges lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. Dusty had taught him a lesson in loyalty, courage, and compassion. And whatever happened next, Jake was ready to face it, with Dusty by his side. The first part of this story ended with Jake watching the sunset, the corral filled with the soft sounds of hooves on the dirt and the quiet rustle of grass. For 3 days he had felt fear and uncertainty, but now there was hope, trust, and a new sense of purpose. Dusty had returned, and with him came a story that Jake would never forget. A story of courage, friendship, and unexpected miracles on the open range. Jake could hardly believe his eyes. Dusty had returned after 3 long days, and behind him, following cautiously, was the smaller horse. Jake's heart pounded as he dismounted and approached them slowly. He spoke softly, letting Dusty know he was calm, steady, and not a threat. "Easy there, boy. And you too, little one. You're safe now." Dusty nudged Jake's shoulder gently, his way of saying everything was all right. The smaller horse, still hesitant, inched closer to Dusty, taking comfort in his friend's presence. The morning sun warmed the corral as Jake observed the newcomers. He had seen Dusty face wild storms, thick forests, and treacherous terrain, but the loyalty and care he had just shown now, leading a lost horse to safety, felt like something extraordinary. Jake marveled at Dusty's intelligence and instinct. This was more than friendship between horses. It was guidance, protection, and trust, all wrapped into one. Jake decided to name the new horse Shadow. The name seemed fitting, quiet, cautious, and mysterious. Shadow stayed close to Dusty as they explored the corral together. Dusty nudged Shadow gently, showing him the best spots to eat and drink. Jake watched, fascinated by the silent communication between the two horses. Dusty seemed to say, "Follow me. You'll be all right here." Shadow, though hesitant, obeyed. The first few hours were filled with careful observation. Jake made sure to give both horses fresh water and hay. Shadow's movements were nervous, and every sudden sound made him jump, but Dusty stayed close, offering reassurance. Jake realized that Shadow must have been alone and scared for some time, which made Dusty's actions even more remarkable. Dusty had not only survived the 3 days apart, but had also thought about another being's safety. As the day went on, Jake began to wonder about Shadow's past. Where had he come from? How had he survived on his own? Shadow's fur was dusty and matted, and his hooves had small cuts and scrapes, evidence of a rough few days. But the horse's spirit was strong. Shadow's eyes, though wary, held a glimmer of trust that Jake knew would grow over time. Dusty had clearly become a mentor, a protector, and perhaps even a friend for this newcomer. Jake spent the morning trying to calm Shadow further. He spoke in soft tones, crouching low to appear less intimidating. Slowly, Shadow edged closer, sniffing Jake's hand before retreating. Dusty stayed near, acting almost as a buffer between the human and the newcomer. Jake understood the message. Patience was key. He remembered all the advice his father had given him about handling horses. They feel what you feel. If you are calm, they will be calm. Jake took a deep breath and let that thought guide him. By afternoon, Jake decided it was time to let the horses explore the pastures. Dusty led the way, and Shadow followed, still hesitant, but gradually gaining confidence. They walked together side by side, as if they had always known each other. Dusty occasionally glanced back, making sure Shadow was keeping up. Jake followed behind, enjoying the sight of his two horses moving together. It was almost magical. The way Dusty seemed to take care of Shadow without any instructions, just pure instinct. While they walked, Jake thought about how different this experience was from his usual routine. He had dealt with lost animals before, but never had one return with another in tow. Dusty's intelligence and loyalty amazed him, and he felt a deep sense of pride. There was a lesson here, Jake realized. A lesson about compassion, trust, and the unexpected ways life could surprise you. Dusty had not only survived but had made a difference in another horse's life. As the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, Jake brought both horses back to the corral. Dusty was calm, almost proud, while Shadow showed signs of exhaustion but also comfort. Jake carefully inspected Shadow, noticing that the cuts and scrapes on his hooves were minor and would heal with care. He applied some ointment, making sure to be gentle. Shadow flinched at first but relaxed when he saw Dusty standing close, calm and reassuring. That evening, Jake prepared a simple meal for himself while watching the two horses graze. Dusty stayed close to Shadow, occasionally nudging him gently or showing him how to find the sweetest patches of grass. Jake felt a warmth in his chest as he watched the two bond. It was as if he had witnessed a miracle. The loyal companion he had always trusted had returned not only safely but also with someone in need of help. Jake knew that the next few days would be important for Shadow to adjust fully, and he was ready to give him the time and care he needed. Night fell, and the ranch grew quiet. The wind whispered through the trees, and the distant mountains seemed to glow under the light of the rising moon. Jake built a small fire outside his cabin, keeping an eye on both horses. Dusty lay down near Shadow, keeping him close and protected. Shadow, though still cautious, slowly relaxed under Dusty's watchful eye. Jake realized that the bond between horses could be as deep and meaningful as any human friendship. He felt a renewed respect for these animals and for the trust they placed in each other, and in him. Over the next few days, Jake continued to observe and nurture Shadow. He spent hours walking alongside him, letting him get used to human presence. Dusty remained an ever-present guide, showing Shadow the routines of the ranch and the safe places to eat and drink. Shadow began to gain confidence, following Dusty more willingly and responding to Jake's gentle voice. Each small step felt like a victory, and Jake celebrated every sign of progress, knowing that trust and patience were the foundation of any lasting bond. One morning, Jake decided to try something new. He brought out a saddle and let Dusty demonstrate how to stand calmly while Jake checked the equipment. Shadow watched intently, his ears perked and eyes focused. Dusty remained steady, and Shadow began to mirror his behavior, slowly understanding that humans could be trusted. Jake spoke softly. "It's all right, Shadow. We're not going to hurt you. You'll learn, just like Dusty did." The small horse seemed to listen, moving closer with cautious curiosity. By the end of the week, Shadow had made significant progress. He allowed Jake to brush his coat and clean his hooves, always staying close to Dusty for reassurance. Dusty, in turn, seemed proud of his new companion, occasionally giving him gentle nuzzles and playful nudges. Jake smiled, realizing that Dusty's guidance was teaching Shadow not just to trust him, but to trust the world around him. It was a delicate balance of patience, care, and understanding, a balance that Jake was learning alongside the horses. Jake began to think about the future. Shadow had no known owner, and it was clear that he had been alone for some time. Jake decided that he would welcome him into the ranch fully, giving him a permanent home. Dusty had made the decision for him, in a way. By showing that Shadow could be trusted and cared for, Jake felt a deep sense of responsibility and gratitude. The bond between Dusty and Shadow had grown quickly, and he knew that with time, they would become inseparable, just like Dusty and himself. The days passed, and the trio settled into a new routine. Dusty led Shadow through the ranch, showing him the safe paths, the best grazing spots, and the quiet corners where they could rest. Shadow responded with growing confidence, learning from Dusty's example and from Jake's gentle guidance. Jake felt a deep satisfaction as he watched their relationship develop. It was more than just two horses and a cowboy. It was a family, bound by trust, care, and the shared experiences of the past week. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the fields, Jake sat on the porch of his cabin and watched Dusty and Shadow play in the corral. They ran side by side, nipping gently at each other, and then paused to nuzzle, a silent expression of friendship. Jake felt a profound sense of peace. The worry and fear of the past 3 days had transformed into awe and gratitude. Dusty had returned safely, bringing Shadow with him, and in doing so had reminded Jake of the power of loyalty, patience, and compassion. As night fell, the ranch was quiet, with only the soft sounds of hooves and rustling grass. Jake knew that challenges might still come, but he also knew that with Dusty and Shadow by his side, they could face anything together. He smiled, feeling a deep connection to both horses and a renewed sense of purpose. Dusty had taught him a lesson that words could not fully capture. The lesson that love, trust, and loyalty could overcome fear and uncertainty, and that sometimes the most unexpected events brought the greatest blessings. And so, life on the ranch continued, richer and fuller than ever. Dusty had returned not just to Jake, but as a guide, protector, and friend to a new companion. Shadow was learning to trust, to explore, and to live again. And Jake felt honored to be a part of that journey. Together, the three formed a bond that could not be broken. A bond built on patience, care, and the quiet, unwavering courage of a loyal horse. Days passed, and life on the ranch slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. Dusty and Shadow had grown more comfortable with their surroundings, and Jake could see the beginnings of a bond forming between the two horses that warmed his heart. Every morning, Dusty would lead Shadow out of the corral, walking slowly along the familiar paths of the ranch, showing him the safe spots to graze, the shallow river where the water was clean and calm, and even the soft patches of dirt where they could rest without worry. Shadow followed closely, sometimes stumbling over roots or small rocks. But Dusty never left his side. It was clear that Shadow was learning from his new friend, gaining confidence with each careful step. Jake watched them from a distance at first, making sure Shadow was adjusting well. He could see the fear that lingered in Shadow's eyes slowly begin to fade, replaced by curiosity. He decided that it was time to spend more time directly with Shadow, helping him grow accustomed to humans again. That morning, Jake approached the two horses with a bucket of fresh water and a small bundle of hay. Dusty nickered softly at Jake, as if encouraging him, while Shadow watched with wide eyes, tense but not afraid. "Kinda quiet there, huh?" Jake said, kneeling down a little so he wouldn't seem too intimidating. "It's okay, Shadow. I won't hurt you." Shadow sniffed the air cautiously, taking a tentative step closer. Dusty nuzzled Shadow gently, almost pushing him forward, and slowly, Shadow edged nearer to Jake. His hooves shuffled nervously on the soft dirt, and his ears twitched at every small sound, but he stayed close to Dusty for reassurance. Jake reached out a hand slowly, letting Shadow sniff it before attempting to touch him. The first touch was small, a gentle pat along the neck. Shadow flinched at first, then relaxed slightly when Dusty pressed his side against him, a quiet show of support. Jake felt a surge of pride and relief. "Good boy," he whispered to Shadow. "See? Nothing to worry about. Dusty's got you." The bond between the horses was teaching Shadow to trust again, and Jake knew it would take patience, but he was ready to give it. Over the next few days, Jake made a routine. He spent time with both horses each morning, letting Dusty lead Shadow and showing him how to respond to his voice, gestures, and commands. Shadow's progress was slow at first, but steady. He learned to eat from Jake's hand, to drink calmly from the trough, and even to walk alongside Jake without fear. Dusty, always nearby, nudged him forward when Shadow hesitated, and Jake marveled at the silent communication between the two animals. It was almost as if Dusty was saying, "Take your time. We're in this together." One afternoon, Jake decided it was time to introduce Shadow to the saddle. Dusty had long been a reliable and patient teacher in these matters, and Jake knew Shadow would respond better with Dusty's guidance. He carefully brought the saddle out, letting both horses sniff it. Dusty stood calmly, as if to demonstrate that there was nothing to fear, while Shadow edged closer, eyes wide with caution. Jake spoke softly. "Easy, Shadow, just like Dusty. You'll see. It's nothing to be afraid of." The process took hours. Jake started by letting Shadow simply touch the saddle with his nose, then carefully draping it over his back. Dusty stayed near, remaining calm and steady, and slowly Shadow began to relax. By evening, Shadow allowed Jake to adjust the saddle and even stand beside him while he touched it, a small but significant step forward. Jake knew that trust was being built. Trust between him and Shadow, and trust between Shadow and Dusty. Night fell, and Jake left the horses in the corral, Dusty and Shadow lying close together. The sight was comforting. Shadow had finally begun to feel safe, and Dusty had fulfilled his role as protector and guide. Jake reflected on the past week, thinking about how much had changed. In just a few days, a lost, frightened horse had learned to trust again, thanks to Dusty's loyalty and patience, and Jake's care and understanding. The ranch felt alive with a new energy, a sense of hope and renewal that hadn't been there before. Over the next week, Jake began riding Dusty and Shadow together. He led Dusty first, with Shadow following, guiding them along the familiar trails of the ranch. Shadow's confidence grew with every ride. He learned to respond to Jake's voice, to maintain a steady pace, and to trust Dusty's lead. Dusty occasionally slowed down, letting Shadow catch up, or nudged him gently when he lagged behind. It was clear that the two horses were forming a strong bond, one based on respect, trust, and mutual care. Jake also began introducing Shadow to the other animals on the ranch. The cows, goats, and chickens were initially curious about the newcomer, and Shadow watched cautiously from a distance. Dusty's calm presence helped Shadow feel safe, and soon he began to explore the ranch more confidently, understanding that this was his new home. Jake marveled at how quickly Shadow was adjusting, and he knew it was all thanks to Dusty's guidance. One afternoon, as Jake was repairing a fence near the edge of the pasture, he noticed Shadow and Dusty running together across the field. Shadow's movements were no longer hesitant. He galloped with confidence, his ears forward, and his mane flowing in the wind. Dusty ran alongside him, occasionally nudging him, occasionally looking back to make sure Shadow stayed on course. The sight brought a smile to Jake's face. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that the two horses had formed a true partnership, one that would last for years to come. As the days turned into weeks, Shadow's bond with Dusty grew stronger. Jake began to teach Shadow more advanced skills, following commands, responding to gentle reins, and understanding basic ranch routines. Shadow excelled under Dusty's mentorship, learning quickly and gaining confidence with each passing day. Jake felt proud, not just of Shadow but of Dusty as well. Dusty had always been loyal and brave, but now he had proven himself to be compassionate and wise, guiding a lost horse to safety and helping him thrive. The ranch had changed in subtle ways too. Dusty and Shadow brought a new energy, a sense of companionship that extended to Jake as well. The early mornings felt brighter, the long days in the fields more rewarding. Jake found himself talking to Shadow as he worked, offering gentle encouragement and praise. Shadow responded with soft whinnies and affectionate nuzzles, showing that the trust between them was growing steadily. Dusty, as always, stayed near, ensuring that Shadow felt secure. One evening, after a long day of riding and tending to the ranch, Jake sat on the porch, watching the two horses graze in the golden light of sunset. Dusty and Shadow moved side by side, occasionally nudging each other, occasionally running a few steps and then stopping to rest. Jake felt a profound sense of peace. He thought about the journey they had all been on. The fear of losing Dusty, the worry and uncertainty, and now, the joy of seeing both horses thriving and bonded. Life had a way of surprising him, sometimes in ways that brought challenges, and sometimes in ways that brought unexpected blessings. Jake realized that Dusty's actions over the past days had taught him more than he could have imagined. He had learned about loyalty, patience, and the quiet courage it took to help another. Shadow had taught him about resilience, trust, and the ability to overcome fear. Together, the three of them had formed a family, connected not by blood, but by love, care, and the shared experiences of the past weeks. As the night settled over the ranch, Jake felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that there would be more challenges ahead, storms, long rides, and the unpredictable life of the ranch. But he also knew that with Dusty and Shadow by his side, they could face anything together. The bond between the horses and himself had grown stronger than ever, and he felt ready for whatever the future might hold. Dusty and Shadow lay down close to each other in the corral, their heads touching gently as they drifted off to sleep. Jake watched them for a few moments, feeling a deep gratitude for the trust and companionship they had shown him and each other. He understood that this was the true magic of life on the ranch. The connections formed, the lessons learned, and the quiet moments of love and loyalty that made every challenge worthwhile. And so life continued on the ranch, each day filled with new experiences and small victories. Dusty and Shadow were no longer just two horses. They were partners, teachers, and friends. Jake had learned to see the world through their eyes, appreciating the beauty of trust, the power of patience, and the joy of unexpected companionship. The bond they shared would last a lifetime, a testament to the quiet courage of animals and the enduring strength of love and loyalty. Life on the ranch had taken on a new rhythm, one that was warmer, fuller, and more alive than ever before. Jake rose early, as he always did, but now his mornings were filled with the soft sounds of two horses moving in the corral. Dusty would whinny a gentle greeting, and Shadow, though still cautious in the early hours, had begun to nicker back, a small but promising sign of trust. The sight of the two horses together, standing side by side as the sun painted the fields in golden light, brought a sense of peace and gratitude that Jake had never felt before. Every day, Dusty led Shadow on little adventures across the ranch. The two horses had become inseparable, exploring the open pastures together, teaching each other what they knew, and relying on one another for reassurance. Shadow's confidence grew steadily. No longer did he flinch at a sudden sound or shy away from Jake's presence. He learned the trails, the shallow river, the soft resting spots, and even the quiet corners where he could graze safely. Dusty remained his guide, always patient, always gentle, showing Shadow that life on the ranch could be safe, enjoyable, and full of trust. Jake often marveled at the bond between the two horses. Dusty had always been loyal to him, but now his loyalty had extended to another. Shadow had grown stronger and more confident under Dusty's guidance, but there were still moments when fear or hesitation crept in. In those moments, Dusty would nudge him gently, sometimes resting his head against Shadow's, silently saying, "You are safe. "We are here together." Jake had learned to watch these moments closely, understanding that the quiet gestures of animals often carry deeper meanings than words ever could. As the days turned into weeks, Jake began to introduce Shadow to more of the ranch's daily routines. He led both horses to the barn, showing Shadow where to rest at night and where to eat. Shadow initially hesitated at the barn's door, but Dusty stepped through confidently, encouraging him to follow. Step by step, Shadow learned that the barn was not a place of fear, but a place of safety. Jake carefully brushed Shadow's coat, cleaned his hooves, and spoke softly as he worked, letting the horse know that he could be trusted. Dusty stayed nearby the whole time, occasionally nuzzling Shadow when he seemed nervous, reinforcing the message that he was not alone. The ranch itself had begun to feel alive in a new way. The cows and goats seemed to sense the growing confidence in Shadow, and even the chickens no longer caused him to shy away. He would watch them with curiosity rather than fear, learning from Dusty that the world outside the corral could be friendly and predictable. Jake spent time walking alongside the horses, letting them explore the fields, encouraging Shadow to test his limits while always being there to support him. Each small step forward was a victory, and Jake celebrated them quietly, understanding the patience and trust required for true growth. One particularly bright morning, Jake decided it was time to take both horses on a longer ride across the ranch. Dusty would lead the way, with Shadow following, learning how to navigate hills, streams, and narrow paths. At first, Shadow moved cautiously, hesitant to stray from Dusty's side. But as the ride continued, he began to pick up on Dusty's cues, learning when to slow down, when to step carefully over a log, and how to approach the shallow river without fear. Jake felt a sense of pride and wonder. The journey wasn't just teaching Shadow, it was teaching him as well, showing him the power of patience, observation, and compassion. By mid-afternoon, the three of them had reached a small clearing near the edge of the ranch, where wildflowers grew in abundance. Dusty and Shadow grazed side by side, their heads occasionally touching, and Jake sat on a rock nearby, watching them. The beauty of the scene, the soft wind, the golden sunlight, the quiet companionship of three beings bound together by trust, filled him with a deep sense of gratitude. Life on the ranch had changed in ways he hadn't expected. He had feared loss and felt worry, but now he had gained not only Dusty's unwavering loyalty, but also the joy of helping Shadow find his place in the world. As evening approached, Jake led both horses back to the corral, where he prepared them for the night. Dusty and Shadow seemed content, their trust in each other and in Jake evident in their calm movements. Dusty nudged Shadow gently toward the stalls, ensuring he was comfortable, while Shadow followed without hesitation. Jake smiled, realizing that the trio had formed a bond that was unshakable, built on patience, guidance, and mutual respect. The simple act of returning Dusty with a companion had blossomed into a profound story of friendship and loyalty that would shape their lives forever. Over the next few weeks, Jake worked on building a deeper bond with Shadow. He taught him basic commands, guided him through the routines of the ranch, and gradually introduced him to more challenging tasks, like carrying supplies or helping with light ranch work. Shadow excelled, always learning from Dusty's example and Jake's gentle guidance. Each day brought new achievements, small victories that built confidence, trust, and harmony. Dusty remained a constant presence, a mentor and protector, ensuring that Shadow never felt alone or overwhelmed. Jake often reflected on the journey they had all taken. The fear and uncertainty of Dusty's disappearance now seemed distant memories, replaced by pride, joy and awe at the intelligence and compassion of his horses. He realized that life had a way of testing patience and faith, but it also offered unexpected rewards. Dusty had returned not just to be by Jake's side, but to guide Shadow, showing that loyalty and love could extend beyond the expected. Shadow's growth, courage, and trust were a testament to the power of connection and care. One morning, Jake decided to take Dusty and Shadow to a part of the ranch they hadn't explored before, a wide open meadow with soft grass and a gentle creek. He wanted Shadow to experience freedom and play, to understand the beauty of the world around him. Dusty led the way, galloping lightly across the field, with Shadow following cautiously at first, then picking up speed as he gained confidence. Jake laughed quietly, watching them run together, ears forward, manes flowing in the wind. The sight filled him with a sense of completeness and contentment that words could hardly capture. As the sun began to set, casting warm golden light across the meadow, Jake led the horses back toward the barn. Dusty walked beside Shadow, occasionally nudging him gently or encouraging him with soft whinnies. Shadow no longer hesitated or flinched. He moved with grace, confidence, and trust, a testament to the lessons Dusty had taught and the patience Jake had shown. The journey from fear to confidence had been long and careful, but the results were extraordinary. Back at the corral, Jake prepared for the night, giving both horses fresh water and hay. Dusty and Shadow stood close together, resting, their heads occasionally touching, as if sharing a silent conversation. Jake sat on the porch of his cabin, watching them in the soft light of the setting sun. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Dusty had returned after being lost for 3 days, bringing with him not only safety, but a new friend in Shadow. Together, the three had created a family built on trust, patience, and love. The nights on the ranch had become a time of reflection and gratitude. Jake often thought about the challenges he had faced and the lessons he had learned. Dusty had shown him the power of loyalty. Shadow had shown him resilience, and together they had taught him about patience, understanding, and the quiet miracles that could unfold when care and compassion were at the heart of action. Jake knew that life on the ranch would continue to bring challenges, but he also knew that with Dusty and Shadow by his side, they could face anything together.
One evening, as the stars appeared in the clear night sky, Jake led Dusty and Shadow to a quiet hill overlooking the ranch.
He allowed them to graze freely, enjoying the cool breeze and the peaceful surroundings. The two horses moved together effortlessly, Dusty always watching Shadow, guiding him and offering reassurance. Shadow's trust in both Dusty and Jake was complete. He no longer flinched at the wind, the distant calls of animals, or the rustle of leaves. He had learned that the world could be safe, gentle, and full of beauty. Jake sat on the hill, watching the trio against the backdrop of the moonlit fields. He felt a sense of wonder and gratitude, realizing that life had a way of teaching important lessons in the most unexpected ways. Dusty's disappearance, the worry and fear he had felt, and the return with Shadow had created a story of loyalty, courage, and trust that he would never forget. It was a story that reminded him of the quiet strength of animals, the importance of patience, and the joy of unexpected companionship. As the night deepened, Jake led Dusty and Shadow back to the barn, where they settled in for a peaceful night. Dusty rested beside Shadow, keeping him close, while Jake stood nearby quietly watching. The bond between the two horses had grown unshakable, a living testament to the power of care, guidance, and friendship. Jake knew that whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together, strong, united, and full of trust. And so, life on the ranch continued, brighter and fuller than ever. Dusty, Shadow, and Jake had formed a family built on loyalty, love, and the quiet miracles that arise from trust and compassion. Each day was filled with new adventures, small victories, and moments of beauty. Together, they had discovered that even in uncertainty, life could bring unexpected blessings, and that the bonds formed through patience, guidance, and care could last a lifetime.